Welcome back to Conversations from the Hearth. We're joined by a very special guest, Dr. Hernandez. Dr. Hernandez, welcome.
Hello.
So, Dr. Hernandez, we are just hearing about you at your academy. What school what is your school name again?
I teach at Lozano's Martial Arts Studio here on the south side of San Antonio,
Very
Texas.
nice. Awesome. Can you tell us, Dr. Hernandez, a little bit about your background, how you got started in the martial arts and where it's taken you to today?
Yeah, so when people ask me that, and I'm very honest and open about it, it was movies. I really love martial arts movies growing up. I was always an athlete. My parents always had myself and my siblings playing sports. I was playing baseball, football, all these things. I just wasn't really necessarily interested. I did it because that was the I had an opportunity to, but but I also really enjoyed school. I enjoyed learning. I enjoyed doing those things. Um, then I got into martial arts movies. You know, like Kill Bill, The Matrix, like a lot of these really cool, Tarantino movies are really cool, flashy movies. And I would actually, when I was a teenager, I would like practice the moves. I would just like practice routines and just do stuff like that, just kind of be goofy and always deny it if anyone asks me, "What were you doing right now?" I'm like nothing, and I'm just kind of sweating, and I got Kill Bill on the screen, and so that's what it was. I was into movies, and I was 13 or 14, and I told my dad, I said, "Hey, I want to do like karate," because I didn't know what to say. I said, "I want to do karate. I want to do something like that. I want to learn martial arts." And it was never about fighting. Like for me, I've never considered myself like a fighter. I've never been interested in competition. And so I really like that very kind of like always learning aspect of martial arts, where there's always people that can better you. There's always people that can teach you. And you can also see that in my other aspects of my life because I am a teacher, I'm an educator, and so that's always been very important to me. Someone that I can learn from, and somebody that can teach. And so, sure enough, my dad found somewhere, and we went. I don't know if exactly it was this day, but I would have football practice in the evening, and the class would start around, I think, 7:30 at the time, and we'd go. My dad would take me after school, after practice, and I remember my first few practices before I had a uniform, because they give you Master Lozano gives you a week just to try it, just try it, no cost or anything. And I would go in my football, uniform, because my dad would pick me up from school and we'd go straight to the to martial arts studio, and that's what I did, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the kicking. The instructors were amazing. I enjoyed the really technical stuff like arm grabs and like the anatomy, like kind of learning anatomy of the body, and just kind of saying, man, there's more to this than just the movies. The movies got me hooked, and I still watch martial arts movies. They still get to me, but that's really what interested me is media, is seeing it in movies, and also to an extent video games, but more so I could remember seeing um The Matrix. I would always watch that. That was my movie, just because of all the amazing choreography. Even now, as a martial artist, I'm like, I look back and I'm like, wow, that's still amazing choreography.
Yeah.
And and that's kind of where I got started into the martial arts. Um, would you want me to kind of keep going further, or do you have any follow up?
Yeah, sure. As much as you want to share.
Okay. Okay, so after training, and again, this I started. I'm gonna be 31 this year, so I started about when I was 14. So it's been a while since I started. Not as long. Not as long as you. But
Yeah.
so I just remember training and um, actually talking about Hijan Musul. I was a white belt when I got to meet Grandmaster Jeon. He actually came by, and he's the founder of Hijan Musul, and he's 10th Dan Hapkido, and he created his own martial art. And so I was there, and I remember going to they invited us to a seminar with Grandmaster Myung and at the time I didn't know what master was, I didn't know what grandmaster, I didn't know any of these titles. They didn't mean anything to me at the time. And so I said, okay, cool. Like this guy's coming. He was an elderly man. And I went, I said, okay, let's see what he can show me. Master Rosano saying he's really good. Let's see. And I remember going, one of my first memories, in martial arts. And I'm watching, Grandmaster Myung. talk about something. He's doing movements. He's only speaking in Korean. And so I'm like looking and trying to figure out what he's doing. And he's showing like a wrist release, basic, right? Because we're white belts, yellow belts, basic wrist release, the anatomy of like a wrist grab, wrist release. And he does the wrist grab, and I was a kind of a cocky kid, right? I was in sports, and I said, "Oh, I did this. I could do this," and so I did it rough. I did it hard, and so he says, kind of like he gestures like almost like what's next, like what then? You know what I mean? Because he Master Ozan's very similar in that way to Grandmaster Young. He's like, okay, you did this, but what else? And so and I was like, I don't know. Like I was just focused on the release. I didn't think of afterwards. And so he said, in his way, you could do this, and then you can like chop the neck or something, some move. And I'm like, what? And then he did it, boom. And like when he hit me, I was like dazed. I was almost like knocked out. And I said, man, this old man almost knocked me out. And I was like, I thought I was tough. I was an athlete, a football player.
Yes, sir.
And that's when it was like, oh man, like it just every time I would know something, it was like, man, there's something more to it. And even to this day, it's like there's always those little breadcrumbs that kind of lead to something else. And so yeah, that's one of my first memories. And since then I was hooked. I was hooked on Hijab Musul, and I can explain more about the actual art later. But I was training, and the way since Lozano's martial arts, they teach multiple arts there, right? When I started learning, they were kickboxing, they were teaching Hijab Musul, and they were teaching Taekwondo. Taekwondo, even now, we primarily teach the kids, right? Because it's more of a discipline. It's more the parents enjoy the way that it looks when they do their forms, things like that. Hijab Musul, we tend to teach to the adults. And so when they told me that, because they're going to teach me Taekwondo, and I did get my yellow belt, they were like, oh, we need some more adults, in Hijab Musul, because it's not well known, and people come here for Taekwondo. They always ask for Taekwondo. And I said, well, I'll do it. I'll try it out. And so I got my yellow belt. I learned, a few techniques to get my yellow belt, well, more than a few, but, and I just said, man, I really like it. It felt special. And there were many times where, it was me and maybe one or two other people practicing, even in the adults class, because what ends up happening is the teenagers, the kids, they learn Taekwondo, they become adults. And so now all of our adults class are Taekwondo. So it's very difficult to teach Hijab Musul because they already have that foundation. And there is a learning curve. They are very different, and I can go into that later. But it kind of made me feel special, and I kind of learned the techniques. Master Lozano would very, very often give me one-on-one, like, since I was the only student many times of Hijab Musul, he's like, hey, come on, let's learn this, or this is what my master taught me, or this is what Grandmaster wants us to look like. And so I felt very privileged to have a lot of those one-on-one interactions with Master Lozano that many people, they don't often get to get. I get it now. Like if I ask him something, he will, because I've been an instructor with him for many years. But there are many times where you have, and we might know this, you have to kind of build up to that level where we need the younger belts or maybe the newer black belts, right, like yourself, to get some more experience. But so that's kind of where I am now. And as soon as I was a red belt, which is equivalent to our brown belt in Taekwondo, it's like right before black belt. When my instructor, like one of the main instructors that was there, he wasn't able to go as often. Family issues, adult, life happened. And Master Lozano asked me, would you like to lead the class? And ever since, I've been leading the adults class, and then I started teaching the kids class when I needed to. So up until today, I did take a break. Back in 2014, I did go to graduate school. I got my master's out of state. And then I came back, and I was still, on the grind working. I went back to get my PhD, which I just finished. But I've been back for about 3 years now, training and teaching, and now now I'm there. Now I wish I could be there more often, but about 3 or 4 days a week I'm there, teaching or training, especially jujitsu. I don't teach jujitsu, I don't know it, and so I go and I'm a student. I'm a white belt just like the other ones. Obviously I know my throws and my kicks and stuff, but but I am a white belt, and I act like a white belt. I ask the questions. I don't shy away from saying I don't know something. And I try to model that behavior, because it's interesting, because some of my lower belts are higher than me in jujitsu, and so I'm just like, I try to model that for them, like, hey, I don't know everything. I know a lot. I'm not gonna let you like just walk all over me, but I'm gonna tell you that, we can always learn things, and one black belt that's just a one step, right? That's just one step, and there's also degrees, there's also multiple martial arts, but I'm telling you, right now, Lozano's martial arts studio, it's really a powerhouse right now because of Hijan Musa, which has throwing locks, kicks, taekwondo, obviously kicking, um, the forms, things like that. Then now jujitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which was not available when I was first training. I wish it would have been there. I would have learned it, but we also have kickboxing, of course. Like there really is, you can be there 6 days a week, and you can learn um you can learn some of the best martial arts in the world, as far as I know. So
That's
yeah, I
awesome.
think I'll end there. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we're always a white belt in something. I always hang a white belt in my
Right.
closet to remind me that, I need to keep my mind open and learning and keep myself humble. So more power to you,
Yes.
sir, for
It's
starting.
very humbling. Yeah. It's a very
Yeah.
humbling experience to have maybe a yellow belt or green belt, but they're a blue belt in jujitsu and they're just destroying me on the ground. Like I don't even know how to move anymore, and the thing is that being a black belt already, having that experience, you don't stay a white belt very long, right? Like we kind of learn a little bit faster, but there is still those instances where it's like, oh man, like um, I would have never thought to do that or never thought to move that way. And of course, it came from that merging and that transition from different martial arts.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
sir.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah.
No, no. So, Huijan Musul, I'm hearing about this for the first time in our podcast, but I'm very fascinated. You
Okay.
said it broke off of Hapkido, or is that correct?
So yeah, so some of the history, and I don't know, I'm not a historian, but some of the history that we do learn, when we learn about the art, is it means revolving martial art.
Mm.
So from my understanding, there are, that revolution, that movement of the hips, of the shoulders, of the legs, that's in many martial. That's how we generate power, right? Hijan Musul, since it is based off Hapkido, Grandmaster Myung Jae, he is a 10th dan in Hapkido. And so my understanding and what we're told is that um, in the upper belts, like black belts of Hapkido, they start incorporating those specific rotating movements, like everything is rotation, and also jujitsu, judo. There's those rotating power. The only thing is that rotation that's incorporated into every technique, even if it's a wrist release, even if it's a like a neck choke. It's not super unique, right? Because like I said, many martial arts offer this. It's just that at white belt, like the beginner white, yellow belts, those are already incorporated into the techniques, and so that's why it does have a steep learning curve, because it's not necessarily the only art that does it. By far it's not, but I would say it's one of the ones that really incorporate, and they really make you focus, that first 1 or 2 years on that rotation, and then it builds off that. Another thing that, I can only say about, Taekwondo, since that's what I learn and that's what I teach, and I'm still learning a little bit of the jujitsu, is that I would consider, being, and I feel comfortable saying this, being in, an academic or being a researcher, it is very scientific, because in Taekwondo, like for instance, where we teach, you can learn a self-defense technique, whether it's a grab, and you can learn that like a brown belt technique. You can learn it and memorize it. In Hijan Musul, if you start at like a red belt or green belt technique, which is like intermediate, the white and yellow, um, they established the techniques that you use in green belt.
Mm.
For instance, the same movements, they're just built upon in the upper belts, all the way to black belts. So some of the black belt techniques, they're technically white belt. You learn them in white belt techniques, but you just build off of it and you just make it a little bit longer, or maybe you use a different throw at the end. And so that's why I consider it scientific, because it's very hard you have to start at the beginning, get a good foundation, and kind of learn how to move your body in a specific way. That's just any martial art, but specifically, I always tell the students when I'm teaching any technique in Hijan Musul, find the circle. Where's the circle? There's always a rotation even if it's a wrist release, this isn't the release. The release is in the shoulders, or it's in the hips. And so it's when people are stronger, especially, men, it's very easy for us to overlook those parts of the technique, at least from what I found, because we can strength through it. But the thing is always with martial arts, right, is that there's always going to be someone stronger, faster, that knows more than you, or you're not always going to be young. Like, we're not always going to be as strong as we are now. And so kind of like it's slowing our body down and slowing our mind down to think, let's find the most efficient way that we can get a wrist release. Yes, you can do this. You can punch really hard. You can do this. You can kick very hard. But if we can find a way to efficiently do that same thing and get the job done, whether it's get away, or whether it's defeat your opponent, or hold your opponent down or anything like that, then that's what we go for. And having said that, I'm not trying to like glorify it or come off as super biased, but it is difficult for someone who is coming from, let's say, a taekwondo, or coming from kickboxing or boxing, you know, because it's like, it's great that you can kick hard and punch hard. That's awesome. We can all do that. We eventually learn that, but it's that slowing down and saying, let's focus, because once you're instructor, it's not only about you anymore. Right now you're teaching others, you're teaching children, you're teaching women, you may be teaching the elderly. And so I think it breaks that mold of um you know that you can only do sports when you're young. Um and so I think Grandmaster Myung is a perfect example. He's in his 80s, and we got to see him actually not too long ago. I think back in October he came down for a seminar and for a celebration we had. And I mean, he moves. He moves. He doesn't look like an elderly person. He moves. Just he was on the floor with us. He was showing us techniques. He was holding paddles for us, and I had the privilege to be his partner. And I felt, you know, um, he still got it. And that's a perfect example what I would want to be, because he does stretch. He does stretching, and he does things for longevity. It's not all about who can hit the hardest, who can take the most hits, right? That might be a sport mentality, but of course, martial arts is about longevity. And I think that's coming from like an MMA, world right now that we live in. That is not interesting for a lot of people, and I know that. But for me, the most interesting things that about Hejan Musul is that for me it does stress the longevity. Many traditional martial arts do,
Mhm.
and it has throws. We have locks, which we are familiar with Hapkido, but it also has the weapons aspects to it, to
Yes.
where um, every empty-handed, uh, every empty-handed technique, you can apply it to a weapon, in one way or another. You might have to, modify it a little bit, um, but it also has, of course, the deep breathing, those breathing exercises, and that's actually actually, it is my first publication, my first scholarly publication was on Hijjan Musul and the effects that breathing has on individuals. And so that was back in 2013 when I did it. But um there has always just been that curiosity that Hijjan Musul kept coming me back to. Of course, Taekwondo still kind of sparks my interest. Jiu-Jitsu does spark my interest as well. But Hijjan Musul, I think, really has a special place for me, because not only that it's my first black belt, and that's one that I taught often, but just the approach to martial arts that it comes with. Um, because seeing other even our jujitsu class, it's the same school. We pretty much have the same students, right? They're the ones that are there 5 or 6 days a week,
Yes, sir.
but the way class is conducted is a little bit different. Same
Mhm.
thing with Taekwondo, it's a little bit different. Um, Hijab Musu, the way we conduct class, and this might not be everywhere, but the way we conduct class, it is serious, but it is about that camaraderie. Um, and I guess what I'll kind of wrap this up with is that I got to feel that camaraderie when Grandmaster, he was going back to Korea. I think he was actually flying to Mexico after us, to do a seminar there. But I went and kind of bowed to him, and I did I was trying to be respectful, and he kind of like grabbed me and like pulled me and hugged me, and I'm like, oh, like it kind of I'm like, this man always surprises me, like he
Yes, sir.
cannot like not surprise me. And he said, oh, we're family or something, in his English. He said, oh, we're family. And I'm not gonna lie, like it brought me to tears. Like, when I walked away, I'm like, and I looked at the other instructor, I'm like, did that just happen? Like, this man is like a superstar, right? In our mind, right? In martial arts, he's like a superstar for us. Um, and he was just like, no, this is it. Um, and so I think, getting that from, our founder, from our grandmaster, just that camaraderie, and we try to emulate it, right? We try to be stern but also caring. I think he exemplifies that in every way, and Master Lozano, he I think he tries to exemplify that as well. um and he's very stern with us. I tell some of the newer students, some stories, right, when I was coming up, and like, this used to happen, and some of the instructors used to do this to me, and I got this scar from this, and all these, all this old school kind of mentality. We're trying to be tough. um and I said, well, now it's, we are, it does feel a little bit different, and I enjoy it. I feel more relaxed. I don't feel like I have to try to be the toughest person in the room. um and so, anyway, I don't know if that made all sense, but
Oh
those
yeah.
are just the kind of thoughts and feelings that kind of come up when I think of this art, and also, of course, where I learned it at Lozano's martial arts studio. So,
Your love and your passion really comes through with
Yes,
your
sir.
words,
Yes, sir.
and I'm very intrigued about Musul. So and you were also talking about how that community is so strong, and you felt so much love from your grandmaster, and I think that's one of the things that I've noticed. I've been doing Taekwondo my whole life, and I've been in kind of one foot in that Korean community increasingly more and more, especially since I went and lived in Korea and had a lot of Korean masters over the years. And I have to say, I also have had, my foot in a lot of other kinds of communities. I've been in MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and American karate and things like that. And
mhm,
that Korean martial arts community is my favorite. It really
mhm,
is immensely humble, very respectful, a lot of honor, uh, and also just very kind and compassionate. Uh, so I'm right there with you. I totally agree that what you probably are getting from Heijun Muso, I got from Taekwondo and that community, and I think a lot of that is just the Korean culture.
mhm,
So
mhm,
really,
mhm.
a lot of great Korean masters that I look up to, not just because of their physical skills, but also because of the individuals that they are. Um,
Right. Yep.
so, you had mentioned a little bit about doing martial arts for life, and I, I, I totally think that that's the ultimate purpose. I know, you know, MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai and some of these maybe more bang and clang martial arts are very popular right now. But I've also been in those disciplines and that side of the industry, and I've seen people just drop out like flies. I've seen people do it, in their 20s, and then they're all broken in their 30s, and they quit and they move on to other things. And it's really a shame, because shouldn't martial arts be something that we can do our whole life, something that will fulfill us deeply, not just give us an ego, but also teach us to be humble and respectful and all these other leadership life skills. And I think are the most important thing to take away from the martial arts. So I'm right there with you with that as well. I wanted to kind of go back, and we were talking a little bit about Musul and weapons, and
Mm,
I
okay.
was kind of curious what weapons you encountered and learned to defend against. Were these modern weapons, ancient weapons, combination of both?
So my favorite, and the ones I spent the most time on, is like a single stick, like short stick,
Okay.
like single double, and bow staff. Those are my two favorite. We also learned sword, but I mean, we don't carry around a sword anymore, right? Um, so I love those because of their practicality. I've also learned, like, there's also like belt techniques, like rope, rope techniques. Um, we've done like nunchaku, nunchuck techniques. Um, what else? Yeah, short stick, double stick, mid staff, full staff. Oh, cane. There's also cane technique that's very popular, right, in Hapkido, from my understanding. But pretty much, I guess it's just the idea that anything could be a weapon, right? Like martial artists, forever, Ever
Mhm.
since TV existed, and we've been hearing martial arts say, yo, anything's a weapon, um, and so and that's true, right? I mean, we learned the stick, right? It's a perfect size, for this. Master Lozano, he's also practiced it's Filipino martial arts, and so there has been some influence in that. In the way we do it, we look very even in Hijamus, we look a little bit different the way we do our techniques than like Mexico or other places. Um, but those are my favorites, and the thing is, with short stick especially, um, we probably all know here, on this call that it's weapon's just an extension of your hand, extension of your arm, extension of your body. It's only until it feels like a part of you that okay, now you're comfortable, now you're able to actually perform with it or respond with it. Um, and so those are the ones. The way Hijan Musul has the art, or like the way the art is formatted, is it's actually in different sections. So there's the empty-handed techniques. There's the kicking, which is just its own kind of section. There's the weapons, which is own section. Um, and actually there's just a specific area just for bladed weapons, which is like sword, a knife, anything with a point on it, right? That's sharp and pointy. And then of course there's the wooden weapons. And so I really enjoy the practicality of it. Again, I'm not like a career performer, or I don't do that. We do performances, every now and then. We have one next week, but when I do weapons, I always just stick to this can be anything. This stick can be anything. This long stick could be anything, right? A broomstick, whatever. And those are the things we focus on. We've had seminars like sword seminars, but again, you might experience this as well. It's like what is the audience interested in, right? It's because when we have a sword seminar, too often many people say, oh, like it's a sword. They kind of look the other way, but it's not just. And again, we all know this in the Zoom call. You're not just learning the sword, how to use a sword, a bladed weapon. You're learning the discipline behind it. You learn the tradition behind it. You learn how when you should and shouldn't, you know, um, prepare prepare yourself, to respond to something or to defend yourself. So it's all those smaller things that I think weapons teach, and obviously it's the you know uh, which I can't say I have too much experience, but it's that kind of like these weapons are meant to harm people, meant to hurt people. I think there's a very distinct feeling, like intuitively, when we have empty hand techniques, and now it's a weapon technique. And
Mhm.
I don't just limit it to sticks or anything, but also weapons. Now we have pistols, rifles. These are modern day weapons that can kill anything extremely efficiently. And the care and the thought that has to go into using these weapons have to be taken. And so I've been kind of interested in because I am a firearms owner. Like I do believe that we should, and we also live in Texas, so it's like people you say that, people are like, oh, okay, it's normal, it's normalized here. But just the way we view a sword, you know, like you got to be very careful. It can harm, it can kill people. I think that same mentality and thought can be applied to our firearms, right? We
Mhm.
don't just we don't just swing around a sword willy nilly. Like we just the same. Like we shouldn't just be pulling our gun out and be playing with it, right? And that's another aspect. We don't play with weapons. They're not meant to be played with. They're not toys. If you want a toy, go get a toy, or because we even don't, in our school, you don't even want to play around with like wooden swords, right? Because you're supposed to treat it as it's a real one. And so I think just that mentality of that empty-handed, I find that teaching empty-handed techniques, they're less unsettling than teaching weapon techniques. I feel like once we start teaching swords or knives, that is kind of like it's almost like a wake up call, like, hey, this is martial arts. Martial arts is meant to sometimes, right? Sometimes it's meant to really harm somebody, if you can't escape, or if you can't get away in time, or if there's multiple attackers. And anyway, so I don't know, but you mentioned weapons, but that's everything that came to mind. It's that
It's
we
very.
typically we might teach basic, stick techniques or bow staff techniques to
Mhm.
beginners, But when it comes to Master Lozano, intentionally, he put knife techniques like way at the other end of the spectrum of the belts. Like it's like brown belt. You won't start learning, or maybe the technique we've been doing for like the past 3 or 4 belts. Like for instance, in Hijan Musul, there's a striking and then a back fist technique. But when you put a knife in your hand, that's a stabbing and then a slicing technique.
So,
And so you learn this motion, boom, boom, boom. You do that, hundreds of times in white belt, yellow belt, all the way to green belt. But then, Grandmaster Myung says, and Master Lozano says, well, now you have a knife in your hand. You don't realize you've been learning hundreds of techniques empty hand, but you actually know how to use a weapon. You just didn't know it yet. You didn't have the tool in your hand to kind of change that way of thinking.
it's like
For instance, go
like
ahead, go ahead.
being a Karate Kid, where he thinks he's been not
Exactly,
so
exactly.
hate the fence and back.
Perfect example. Perfect example. Yeah, and so that's what I love about about Master Lozano and about Grandmaster. It's like you're doing the same motions. Um, it's just like, how should I say it? It's just viewing it from a different perspective.
So,
And I think that's what martial arts teaches. It teaches us, not just to hurt people, but what it feels like to get hurt, right? Because we train with our partners. Nobody likes to get in a choke. Nobody's like to be slammed on the floor really hard. No one likes a wrist lock and you're struggling and it hurts and it's painful. And I think it has a large part in teaching empathy, when others hurt. We hurt others to learn to learn how others, or rather, we let others hurt us to know how it feels to hurt others. And I think that's a big thing. And I know we're talking about the weapons, but um I think that's a reality, because especially like we can have, if somebody starts at maybe 6, 7 years old, they can be black belt, 4 to 6 years, if they're consistent, if they go, like if they practice, if they train hard. um and I think this is just my impression, because I'm also an educator, so I see this. um Parents could see us teaching like knife techniques to like a 14-year-old. Sometimes that's like, oh my gosh, they shouldn't be, or we're teaching like how to defend against a firearm, which is like obviously the best thing to do is to avoid it, but you never know. That's just part of the curriculum, right? Because that's a weapon in our lives now. And so there is some hesitancy when especially young people get to those levels, where it's again, it's like a wake up call, where all the things you've been learning as to defend yourself, there might come a day where you have to use a weapon, or you might come up against a weapon, and you can't be afraid of it, or at least you can't show that you're afraid. You have to react and respond. So anyway, I hope that answered your question.
yeah, no, that's great. And 80% of people who get attacked by a knife don't even know they're being attacked by a knife. So
Oh wow.
treating the hands like knives can be actually a really good tactic, because you just never know.
Oh,
If
I didn't know that.
I can
Go
hop in
ahead.
here, so I have a few questions I want to ask, but I really want to highlight what you said there about the empathy. This is something that I feel like I've internalized, but never really been able to put those words to it, right? Because there is, I talk to my fiance all the time about, like, she's like, I don't want you to go in there and, get hurt. And I have just learned so much about what it means to get hurt, what it means to, hurt another person, and how often, it's been 4.5 years now, and I walk away with bruises and scrapes, but, knocking on wood, I haven't broken a bone, I haven't had any major debilitating injuries, and I'm here all the time, and I think that's really a testament to the proficiency of Grandmaster Olds, working with Grandmaster Olds as my handler, I don't know, the crash test dummy, but
Yeah.
it's such an amazing feeling when you're in front of the class and you get thrown and you do the break fall and the whole class goes like, right?
Right.
Are you okay? And you say, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah.
Because, there's this trust here, and there's this really strong sense of empathy, for sure. I really appreciated you saying that. I was curious.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The breathing techniques you were talking about, Husamusu, and how divided into these kind of sections, and you have the kicking, you have all these different sections. Are the breathing techniques part of the art itself, or is that something that you guys are supplementing in?
No, that's another section that I didn't mention. So breathing would be under like they renamed it when I came back. They're essentially they're like healing techniques, you know, like not, and again, not like supernatural like power, you know, stuff. It's just it's that the relaxation. Sometimes it's massage work. Sometimes it's this almost recovery. I would even say it's healing slash recovery techniques.
Sure.
And so you know, the way I described it in my paper, you know, 10 years ago, is that you know, there's often a view of like hard martial arts versus soft martial arts, or hard techniques versus soft techniques. And so I described, you know, punching, kicking, harming others or like hitting others as, you know, hard techniques. You know, they're pretty much like a hammer and nail, boom, boom, boom. And then breathing techniques or healing techniques, or even meditations even in there as well, as those soft techniques. Those are to recover, those are to help, those are to heal yourself or others. And not to be too, you know, into it, but I was looking at what that does to our brain, not just our body, even though our brain is part of our body, but our mental states. I was looking at mental states. And so going to a gym, you know, going to, you know, work, doing kickboxing, you know, hitting things hard, that's great. You know, in Taekwondo, kicking hard, punching hard, you know, doing jump kicks, that's awesome. But even if a few minutes of breathing techniques, and we have movements with them, of course, that kind of leaves you in a better state when you leave the gym. You're not in a I'm ready to fight state. You're in a calm state, focused state. And we did a demo. It was like a presentation slash demo at a early childhood center here in town on Friday actually. And we actually had them doing the kicking, doing the punching techniques. And at the last 2-3 minutes before they were to leave, right? Because they were all ready to go, we did those breathing techniques, and they did calm down, and they did relax, and they were able to kind of recover like their brain and to focus again. Because there is that aspect of sports where you can't think, you just react. If you think, you're gonna lose. You know, if you think while you're fighting, or if you think while you're defending yourself, you're gonna lose. You're gonna die or something. So those breathing techniques, those meditation, those healing techniques, those recovery techniques, they're a section. Like I see it as, you can, you know, if you don't like the punching or kicking techniques in Jeon Musul, you can just focus on those healing techniques.
Yes, sir.
You know, you can be essentially the healer, right? Of course, you should know breathing. You should know kicking and punching, the locks. But, you know, if you wanted to just focus on those and the sword, you know, that's possible. There is a curriculum just for the breathing and healing techniques. There is a curriculum just for sword techniques. Because even that's what it is. Jaksudo, that's our kicking techniques. Those are all of our, anything we do with the foot, right? That's all in one art. And in, like, if for instance, let's say roundhouse. I don't know. I know different arts call roundhouse different, but our roundhouse is, you know, knee up to the side kick and then bring it back. That's our roundhouse. But just with that roundhouse, we teach the 8 directional, you know, forward, back, side to side, and then the 245s in the front, 245s in the back. So just with that one roundhouse kick, I can go forward if I'm attacking. I can go back and kick, and that's retreating. I can avoid to the side or other side and kick. I can move in, kick, and then maybe grab because I'm closer if I go 45 forward. I can move back, you know, kick, and then maybe enter again, or kick and then, you know, escape. And so just with one kick, there's all the 8 directions, and then the combination of directions. And it's the same with the kick defense. If I do a kick defense, I can move forward, I can move back, you know, 2 to the front, 2 to the back. And so that's what I mean by it's very scientific, because you might learn one and 2, front and back, you know, white belt. But then 3 and yellow belt, you might learn side to side. You're like, oh my gosh, see, I know all the directions. It's like, no, actually, green belt now, you're going to learn the 45 directions because you have different access with those directions.
Sure.
You know, and so that, I hope that kind of went into it a little bit, what you were saying, because it is differentiated. The reason why it's hard for me to think about it differentiated It's because Master Lozano doesn't teach it that way. He teaches everything. You're gonna learn punching. If you're at Lozano's martial arts, punching, kicking, healing, breathing, you're gonna learn everything. You're gonna learn even some kickboxing in our regular classes.
Yes, sir.
And of course the people that are just coming for like the health aspect for the exercise, great. Of course, we might not push them as hard, right? Because they don't want to get into kickboxing. They're not trying to do MMA. It's more just to practice that back and forth, that distance, all those important things. But for those that are really into, they want to be a professional or they want to be a kickboxer. Well, we have classes just for that, where it's it's a little bit more sparring, a little bit more, hit harder, faster. You're gonna learn all the kickboxing moves and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's just kind of, again, knowing the audience. What do they want? And sometimes people just want, breathing. Some people just come in, hey, I just want to exercise. I don't want to go up belt rank or anything. That's completely fine. So I hope that answered your question. Yep.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I was also curious, you talked at the very beginning about rotation and how important that was to Jeon Musul. How would you say that's different from the other arts that you studied? And what kind of rotation are we talking about?
So, okay, let me answer your first question. So how it's different. So I'm only going to speak of primarily Taekwondo, and just from what I've seen from other arts. So Taekwondo, since I teach it, I'm a brown belt in Taekwondo. The way it looks and also the way we practice it to make it look that way is that typically shoulders are like square, right? It's really arm. Let me go up here. It's arm. That's very square, very even. There is still a slight rotation, but like the power is generated this way. It's kind of that torquing motion. And jiu-jitsu uses a lot. They're very similar, right? Because they're a lot of these arts that use throws and locks, they're from very similar origins. So I see it more in jiu-jitsu. But when I say Jeon Musul, like for instance, in a grab, if it's of course you always go against the thumb, you can always rotate. We all know those, right? But it's so for here, like one of the very first techniques you learn is as a white belt is if you're grabbed this way, you push down and through, but it's not your arm. You're pushing with your hip or you're pushing with your shoulder, but you don't lean, right? You don't want to lean forward. What you do is you're turning and the power comes from you going this way, not necessarily down. And that's why I always say, find the circle. Where's the circle? It's not in your arm because that's a straight line. It's actually in your shoulders and in your hips, and it goes this way. And especially with all your striking techniques, when you strike, obviously you do punch a little bit. Even whenever you punch, you're rotating. But there's a concept in Jeon Musul. It's the action reaction. It's this. This is not the action. This is the action. So I'm going like this. So even if I don't go forward, I can still generate power from moving this back. That generates the forward power. And so it's almost backwards because when we learn how to punch and kick, it's like, no, that's the action. This is reacting. But in Jeon Musul, Grandmaster, one of the things he stressed was that's not the action. That's your reaction. So when I'm doing this, even if you're right in front of me, right, I'm not going back forward. I'm going here and I'm turning, and that my hip, shoulders, that generates the power in a small space. And again, it's not like in some aspects it is the way it's utilized, but it's that's how we generate power generally in fighting arts. But it's the aspect that you're learning it from day one, and it's incorporated into every technique, and that it's pretty much just teaching and learning how to use how to use all your body weight, how to use all that rotation energy, and that it can generate power in a small person. And again, some techniques like a roundhouse, you can't really generate power if you don't move your hips. Like those are like, yeah, you have to. Even a side kick, like you have to rotate. But from a grab, from a from a bear hug, that there are techniques where it's not about moving space all the time because you might not have space. It's just about that reaction, that this is actually your action and your body's reacting with that power forward. I'm not explaining as best as Grandmaster can, but that's the idea. And it's replacing It's replacing that muscle energy. Yeah, we're still obviously using our muscles, but that arm strength energy or the leg strength with just that more focusing on that rotation, that movement. Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't know if that made sense. I've never really had to explain it like
that's great.
like this before. Yeah.
No, you just said put such an emphasis on it, and I just wanted to learn more, I mean, rotation is really important. There's a lot of these
Right.
principles that I think are sort of universal in the martial arts, and even
Right.
um martial arts that kind of take hard lines on things, I think can sort of see the wisdom in them. But like rotation is super important. Extension, principles of if I push you, you'll resist me, so that would make it easier for me to pull,
Right.
tighten you up
Yep.
so you get more stiff and I can break your posture. Um,
Right.
so I think it's kind of universal, and I think Taekwondo talks a lot about maintaining a center line, and I personally in their punches, I think they take that to an extreme that's not actually helpful. You should be you should be twisting your hips, you should be coming through with your core. That's the only way you can generate power. But
Hmm.
they do that with their kicks, and that's where Taekwondo really excels, is with its kicking techniques and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, I just do what is the best, and I think you gotta twist your hips when you punch. That's just
You got to twist your hips. What? Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I'm gonna like, and you're familiar with Hapkido, right? You said you're third dan Hapkido. So yeah, and a lot of this makes sense because Grandmaster Myung, he was a 10th dan in Hapkido. So a lot of those techniques, they're going to be similar, but I'm kind of just taking like, because Master Lozano's also studied Hapkido before. I'm taking their word for it because I haven't studied it. That it's that they do say you don't usually learn these like fundamentals, right? That hip rotation, that focus on it. You might be doing it maybe intuitively just because it feels better, but there is not a specific focus on you know uh, your power is coming from there. It's not a result of it. It's actually coming from it. And I think that's what very many, I think, new people, new martial artists, they might realize later on, that actually when you rotate your foot, that's not the body reacting to your arm. It's the opposite, right? It's you're generating power from the bottom up, not the opposite, way around. And I think that and again, that's what I loved about Hijamuso and martial arts in general is there are these very deep concepts that if you want to learn more about it, you can, but you can still do the same things without knowing it. But it might give you maybe that edge, maybe that little edge that you kind of understand intuitively, not intuitively, but you understand past that intuitive level that I'm generating power because of this, and this is the way physiology works, and how can I apply that to other techniques? That's the best part about it, is that when you learn a technique, you only learn the technique. That's it. You can't go anywhere. But once you learn a principle of a technique, like that center body axis you mentioned, the hip rotation, action reaction, you can apply those to other techniques. But I would even go as far as to say you can apply to other aspects of your life, right? And so I think when I came back, when I came back is that when I came back to study and to train, I'm sorry, I'm getting my little book. And Master Myung actually he proposed the four principles, like you mentioned a few of them already, because they are principles in every martial art. There's that center body axis where you can't lean forward or back or else you'll fall. There's the action reaction, like I mentioned. It's that every action has a reaction, and it can go on and on and on. But also there's one in particular that he mentioned. He calls it the principle of stopping force. And what that means is that he described it to us as, think of a car wreck when you're going really fast and you stop suddenly. All that power is it's put into a small amount of time and a small amount of space. And so what he says is that's what you want to do with your body. So when you're moving really quick, you want that when you're striking a person or an object, maybe it's a board or whatever, you're going to move really quick, but then stop suddenly. And what that's going to do is instead of like pushing through and you falling over, you're going to push and you're going to stop, but that force is still going to be projected forward. And it's difficult. Again, a lot of these concepts are difficult to verbalize, but that's the best example that I think he gave us is like when you're, when you're moving very fast, just like your arm when you punch, just like your leg when you kick, and then you have that stop at the end, that's going to cause more damage than kind of like pushing through it slowly. It's got to snap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, these are, yeah, it's got to snap. But these are fun. These are, and again, I don't believe these are brand new concepts. I just think they're new in the way they're being shared, they're being portrayed, because again, we teach these at white, yellow belt. Like imagine learning these concepts at a white and yellow belt. They won't make sense to you until probably black belt, but you're still learning those and you can adapt them to your own style. And that's one thing that I think Master Lozano and Grandmaster have really, pushed is like Hejan Musu it's yours. Once you learn it, once you're black belt, it's yours. Make it what you will. There are still some things that you have to keep, I think traditional, or like we have to look like the same art, right?
Yes, sir.
But it's also about individuality and knowing who you are, and of course going by your body size, by your body shape, whatever. Because Master Lozano always tells me, yeah, you do your style, we're all doing the same style, but you have your style of teaching. And again, these are principles. It's not unique to this art in particular, but the way we express it, I think there's power in. And of course, I'm an academic, so those words, the words and the thoughts that come with thinking like this, like, change the way we view martial arts and change the reason why we learn martial arts. It's not just to fight and punch, right? It's to learn, it's to apply it to other aspects of our life.
Yes, sir.
And I'll end there. I'm sorry, I got a big soapbox this morning.
No,
but...
no. I think, every great martial artist discovers some important truths in their development as a practitioner, and as they go to teach, those truths are what they focus on the most, because those are what they take into their furthest extent. And that's basically how these martial arts get started. The early pioneers of Taekwondo discovered that if you just kept one side back, you would never be able to use both sides of your body. And so maintaining the center line so you can kick on both sides, you can punch on both sides as you're moving forward, allows you to basically, reverse punch constantly forward, or multiple roundhouse kicks moving forward, which was a big revolution in the industry at that time. They were really taking the Karugi scene by storm. And ideas of maintaining like economy of motion is something that's really important in Taekwondo. So you don't in karate, the whole idea was one hit, one kill. So everything was all into one super powerful punch. That's why you see the old school karate practitioners in front of their makawari outside, boom, boom, like everything's into one super powerful punch. But Taekwondo was like, well, we don't want to use up all of our energy in one punch, because we're gonna have to punch a second time, a third time, and continue to move forward. And like these are both true. Like, if you don't punch enough, you're not going to knock them out. And if you don't knock them out, is it really worth your punch? Or if you don't do some significant amount of damage. But also, if you commit entirely to one strike and you miss, well, then you're going to be open and very vulnerable. So these can both be true. And I've studied so many different martial arts, and over the years you just see the same truths coming up here and there and there, and they're just kind of manifested slightly differently. But at the end of the day, I think Bruce Lee said, unless we grow a third arm, martial arts will be what it is, and it doesn't really matter what discipline you study. These are all, at the end of the day, if you go deep enough into the roots, they all kind of look the same.
Yeah. Well, and and again, like my time as a martial artist and my time as an educator, they both learned from each other. They both changed each other. And so, I'm glad. I honestly, hang on. Sorry, my noise cancellation is messing with my head. What was I saying? So, and so I think many people, and you didn't do this, but I think when many people idolize Bruce Lee, but they haven't actually studied martial arts, I think what he's actually saying goes over their head, because he was speaking at such a high level that people say, oh, well, see, any martial art will work. Like anything will do. Just do something. Like I don't believe that's what he was saying. He was just speaking at a very high level, that's saying that there are these principles that we're speaking about. You know, people, and it's not just our physical body, it's also our mental states. It's action reaction, not just of our physical body, but of our mind, right? When we look at somebody, we force them to respond to us. You know, when we project ourselves in a way that, or present ourselves in a way that's threatening, or it's non-threatening, we elicit a response from them. And I think too often, you know, people who don't, or maybe, and again, I'm being very generalized here, right? Because it's, you know, it's a podcast, we're not an academic conference. Like, that people who've only studied, you know, boxing or kickboxing, that are only seeing that hammer nail comparison, they miss the other side of martial arts. But I would also say people who've only studied, like, you know, let's say soft martial arts or defensive martial arts, miss that kickboxing and that seriousness of what martial arts is. And so I think we do need both. But going back to like a lot of the Bruce Lee quotes, I think people, you know, people who quote him, and again, y'all didn't do this, but I shy away from using Bruce Lee as an example when I talk to people who aren't into martial arts, or maybe just starting, because I think they perceive it differently. Because when I say, "Oh yeah, Bruce Lee," you know, using your quote, Bruce Lee said, it's all the same. Well, it is, but it's also not. What he was talking about, the principles of martial arts are the same, but martial arts are different in their approach. Martial arts are different in their, maybe their responses to conflict, right? Because if you only learn boxing, your response is only going to be to punch. You know, if you learn, let's say Aikido. I don't want to pick on Aikido, but if you learn Hapkido or Aikido, like, your response is going to just be to throw. You know, if you don't practice punching, and so, or kicking, and so, yeah. I mean, Bruce Lee is one of those. I'm surprised that it came up until this point, that he came up. Or it took this long for him to come up, because he always comes up in these conversations. That's why he's a legend. But it's kind of like, let's say in you know like in philosophy, you talk about Plato and all these big philosophers, these big heavy hitters. They're often misinterpreted, because they're to the point, they're at the knowledge level of principles and foundations and meanings. They're not at the technique level. And I don't know, I'm just really glad you brought him up. I think this is appropriate to bring to heavy hitters like Bruce Lee. But I would also say we have people now that are, to be frank, just because of time and evolution of martial arts, many people are better fighters than Bruce Lee would have ever been now, because of the knowledge, because of the technical expertise that we got from him, right? We built off of his knowledge. And so I'm a very contemporary person. You know, I am a researcher, so I'm always looking at, yes, Bruce Lee, he at his time, he was amazing. He had so many, he brought those Asian concepts, those Eastern concepts to us, to the United States. You know, he brought those martial arts,
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I can come in here. I mean, yeah, yes and no. I mean, yes, they are. The tactics of martial arts has continued to improve and grow, but it would be like saying in 20 years the next generation of doctors would be better doctors than you. They have a more modern science, so they've learned some new things. My father's a doctor, and he says like 50% of what he learned when he was growing up is no longer useful. That's true. So it's developing, but I don't know if that's to say that they're better. And I think we have to be careful too, because it's like saying, the Celts, when they met the Roman legionnaires and just got slaughtered by the masses because their tactics were no match, doesn't mean that they were lesser warriors. Like, these guys were running with like torques and like naked and like, dying in masses because they had incredible, indomitable spirit. And I think, that's, that being a great martial artist is more than just the sum of your applicability and your technique.
Yes. Okay. So now I'm interested. Okay. So yeah, no, I'm actually, because I guess this is a point where we're gonna maybe diverge on our thinking. Is that, yes, like, tactics. I'm just saying, knowledge, access to knowledge of martial arts, and access to what is actually in the world is so much more now. you know, what we can find out in a week, you know, 2 weeks about martial arts and fighting today, it would have taken Bruce Lee years. It did take him years, right? And so that's what I'm saying is like we can essentially learn everything we can about Bruce Lee in a few weeks. You
Mhm.
know, with the internet, with books, with videos, like we're able to do that now. And the thing is too,
But we have to
people
be
should
careful that we don't
go ahead.
delude ourselves into thinking we know something as deeply by just like watching a YouTube video or reading a book
I agree.
here. It takes there's tacit knowledge that takes decades to understand. And you know, when I went to Korea, what was so eye-opening to me is that we would just practice the same basics again and again. And I was expecting to be learning really advanced techniques, but every time you did it, you would be going layers and layers deeper. And so while the modern martial artists might be more like the Western martial artists compared to the Asian martial artists, where they know a lot of techniques, but they don't know any
Yep.
of them very well. I think the modern martial artist is more familiar with a lot of concepts and terms and things like that. But that doesn't
Right.
necessarily mean that they really understand those things at a deep level. And while Bruce Lee might have spent decades learning what people can learn in a few days, he learned those things in a much more profound way that a modern martial artist, unless they spent those same decades and were the pioneer that discovered those things, would not be able to understand.
Yeah. And that's what I'm glad you said that. I guess that's what I'm getting to is that I understand because I'm in this position too. I'm consider myself a part-time martial artist. I just can't do it full time like I used to. But the principles from martial arts, I always right, you always carry with you. And so just like let's say, you know, back to like Hijan Musor, we can stick with Bruce Lee, the lifetime of training that taught him those principles that he shared with us.
Mhm.
Like I don't think we have to I agree with you that the training and of course the hard work goes into it, but I think we can still take those principles, you know, there comes a trust factor, right? Because even with research, when people go through their research projects, they come with these, this is what I found, right? The ending, the last 2 pages of their study. Um, we kind of have to take that and say, you know what, I trust those findings. I don't have to redo it to believe you, but I think that we know what Bruce Lee found. You know, Grandmaster Myung Jae-ok, he's kind of taken, you know, 70 years, you know, of training, and he's put it into, you know, one art, or he's put it into a few principles that he thinks this is my life's work, in other words. And I think all lifelong professionals of anything, whether it's martial arts, education, you know, research, STEM, whatever, I think if there our life's work is not hundreds of books or hundreds of papers, it's going to be distilled into a few lines, a few words. And I think that's what we see in Bruce Lee's teaching is like we're not quoting all his speeches, we're not quoting all his other things. We're quoting, you know, be like water, which was a philosophical concept. You know, it was like he just made it popular. That's been a concept for a very long time, not just in Eastern religions, but in many. Um, and so that's why I really enjoy. I guess this is my researcher aspect of having that distilled. What did you learn at the end of your life? What is the most important thing that matters to you for martial arts? Um, I think we should build off that. And I think that's what MMA did. They built off of what Bruce Lee said. I obviously it's not the same, right? I think it's been, you know, it's been seen as you know, more of a money making thing than a let's bring the martial arts to normal people or to average people. But at the same time, um, you can't have this understanding, or you can't intuitively have these conversations without actually being there in the dojang or in the dojo and um and really feel confident in what you're saying. And so yes and no, I feel like we agree in
I
different
agree.
ways.
Absolutely. I think we
Yeah.
agree completely.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I have a lot of filial piety and respect for my elders and those that came before and taught me what I know. And just because I have learned a few new things along the way, added my 3 or 4 little golden nuggets to the pile of thousands that I inherited from the last generation, doesn't mean that I can think that I'm somehow a better martial artist than those who came before me.
Right.
That's just, we're all evolving, we're all growing, and mixed martial arts, it's almost a pandemic in the industry, because I've had one foot in traditional martial arts, one foot in MMA, where a lot of, young buck mixed martial artists who come in with a couple months of experience immediately start talking down to a lot of traditional martial artists who built the industry from the ground up, who went into those no hold barred fights where anything goes, and basically proved what worked and did not work. And it's because of those titans that we stand where we are today, and we should show those people a lot of respect. And I don't feel like we do. And so that was why I wanted to make that caveat there, because viewers, and and a lot of them are students, and I want them to understand personally that I think you should have a lot of respect for everybody. Doesn't matter if they're the new generation or the old generation.
So, if I can hop in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just as I was kind of listening there, it made me think of, I don't know if it's a Zen koan or just a Buddhist story, but it made me think of a story that I heard. And it's basically one monk goes up to a senior monk and he says, sir, I don't know their terminology, but the Buddhist monks says, I really want to attain enlightenment, and I want to meditate for 2 hours a day. If I meditate for 2 hours a day, how long will it take me to achieve enlightenment? And his master says, 2 years. And the student says, wow, 2 years. Well, what if I meditate for 4 hours a day? And he says, 4 years. He goes, what? 4 years. What if I meditate for 8 hours a day? He says, 8 years. And then, that's kind of where the story ends. And the student walks away really upset and frustrated. He's like, oh, this master doesn't know anything. And it just makes me think about how sometimes, I fall into this myself all the time. It's like more, like I absorb everything.
Yeah.
And then I keep that story in my back pocket, and I think, okay, what's the quality? How am I approaching it? What's my mentality approaching this teaching and this study? And anyway, while you guys were going back and forth, that's the story that was playing through my head, and I was thinking, what does my 2 hours of study with look like versus those 8 hours shooting for a different goal or whatever? So
yeah. Well, I guess another way of looking at that story is, well, if you ask somebody else what your goals are,
yes, sir.
They're going to give you their answer, not yours. And only obviously, your teachers. I have a master, I have a grandmaster. I can honestly say that Master Lozano's my master, Grandmaster Beyond's my grandmaster. I know those people. If they say I'm ready, I'm ready. If they say I'm not ready, I'm not ready.
Yes,
but that doesn't mean I'm going to wait for them to tell me. I'm going to work towards it. And I think that's one thing that's always made me a little bit different than I think other students, or maybe this new generation, right? I'm a millennial, but the newer generation, it's not that I'm going to speak for myself. It's not that I'm asking you, please give me this. I'm saying, what do I need to do? So that way you'll say, I'm ready, and I'll do it. I've just always been that way. I said, I'm going to work hard. I'm not going to bother you. I'm not going to bug you all the time. But I've always been one to say, if this is my black belt goal, or this is, like they said, my green belt goal, or for jiu-jitsu, my blue belt goal, what is it that you want to see from me? And I can work towards it.
Yes, sir.
And I'll do that, and I'll work hard. And I think very often, and this isn't unique to martial arts, but just maybe sports in general, just even education in general, that there has to be some clear indicator of our progress and our growth. And again, this is highly influenced by my education background. We have to know, because we have to be fair too, because we live in a world where if we have biases, or if we show nepotism in some way, we're going to be called out. We're going to be on social media. We're going to be, so we do need to be fair, and people, we do have biases. And so there has to be some indicator of, when you're a black belt or when you're a blue belt, you need to be able to perform these techniques adequately, right? Not to the best of in the world, right? Because no one can do that, but these adequately. And sometimes you can't. Most people will be able to, but some people won't be able to. Then we have to make that distinction. Well, should we consider other opportunities, or should we have other considerations to promote this person? And I think that kind of gets into another discussion, but that's what you made me think of. It's like, Well, I mean, if we constantly rely on other people's acceptance of us, we might sell ourselves short, because one of the best experiences I've had, like I mentioned with Grandmaster, is he always subverted my expectations, and I think that's one thing I love about being an instructor. It's when I'm like, man, you know what? I don't think you can. Or in my head, I'm saying, man, they can't do that kick, and then they do, and and then we're proved wrong.
Yes,
And I
sir.
think that's one thing we might always not, and respectfully, right? That we as instructors, we want our students to prove us wrong. We want us to say, we want them to kick higher than we think they can. We want them to be able to, take a punch, or not a punch, but like a throw, higher than we thought they could. And I think I am kind of skirting the lines of, yes, you want to be respectful, but then also kind of, that's what an instructor does. That's what an educator does, is we're going to go back and forth. If you can do this, no, I can't. Yes, I can. No, you can't. Like, it's going to be this back and forth.
Yes, sir.
When it's done in a respectful way, I think that's when we get titans like, like we mentioned, like Bruce Lee, like all the titans and boxers and kickboxing and MMA. So I don't know, that's just my personal opinion. And these are conversations that I often have with other instructors at the school, like what's respectful, what's not respectful, because I think that is still being renegotiated. Because even our most respectful student here in the U.S. might be the most disrespectful one if they go to Korea. Like, just because of their background, because of their own schooling in the United States. So I don't know. These things, for me, they're not set in stone. They're a conversation. There are some non-negotiables, but I think very often the non-negotiable, some of the non-negotiables are becoming like less and less. I think because it is a business venture. Like now it is. Like it's not like the old days, right? Like now martial arts is a business venture. We have to understand that our there's an owner, a business, um consumer relationship in some way or the other, but it does intersect with that traditional respect of, you know um being in martial arts, and what we're learning is and can be lethal and is lethal. um I don't know, and so martial arts is it's a very interesting aspect to me, because it does skirt that line of business, consumer, master, student.
Yes, sir.
Where do those start, where do those end, right?
Yes,
So,
sir.
and or employee, instructor, right? That's a whole other aspect, because I mean, I don't get, I don't get paid for vote. I do it because I want to. I love it, and I feel like I'm getting something out of it. I'm going to train. I get to go teach. I get to learn other things. But I think that's a conversation that I don't think I hear very often in martial arts. Is it is a very intersectional relationship.
It is
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no,
Yeah.
it's a very unique experience, and I mean, I've been helping out on the floor since I was 12 years old, and I've been in this industry my whole life. But it is, I have looked at some other jobs, and it is a very different experience. But I think it's also a very beautiful one, when you bring all those things together. Sometimes it
Yeah.
can be a little confusing, but I think it also can be really beautiful if you really lean into it.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, Dr. Hernandez, it has been an absolute pleasure. We've gone for over an hour. I think
Oh, okay.
we probably didn't have enough of your time, but we do really appreciate you
Yeah.
coming on. And I think we were about to go into some other fascinating
Yes, sir.
topics that we'd love
Oh,
to
yeah.
approach with you and talk to you about. But it was great learning more about Jeon Sool today. And I think a lot of similarities there with Hapkido, but also sounds like there's some unique facets as well. And so we encourage anyone who's in your area to go see you and train at your academy. What is one more time the name of your school?
Lozano's Martial Arts Studio,
And that's
and it's on the south side of San Antonio, Texas.
Yes, sir.
perfect. So and where can they find more about your program?
You can Google. I don't have the website in front of me, but you can Google Lozano's Martial Arts Studio in San Antonio, and it'll come up.
Sounds good. Well, it's been a pleasure, sir. Thank
Yes,
you so
sir.
much
Yes,
for
sir.
coming on.
Thank you.